todo el mundo, bienvenido a mi canal. Yo me llamo Sirene. Soy una abogada afro-latina, licenciada y practicando la ley criminal, pero como todos ustedes, a mí me fascina cuando estamos hablando de casos de crímenes reales. En este video vamos a seguir hablando del caso de Lori Vallow Daybell. Si quieren más videos en español, nada más dime allá abajo. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Desiree. I'm a licensed and practicing Afro-Latina criminal attorney who, much like the rest of you, has a severe fascination with true crime cases. Listen, last week we discussed the first part of what it seems like is a never-ending saga of Lori Vallow Daybell, all of her crimes, all of her criminal activity, and just some background on her as a person. I didn't want that video to get too long, so I stopped it at about an hour or so, and today we're just back to discuss more about Lori and what she's done. Today we're going to continue in the second part of our three-part saga of Lori Vallow Daybell. Just to refresh you guys a smidge on where we left off last time. Last time we were talking about how Lori's brother Alex Cox killed her fourth husband Charles Vallow and claimed it was in self-defense. On July 11th, 2019, after 45 minutes of Charles already being deceased, Alex did call the police and did tell them about his claims of self-defense. When the police arrived to the location of the incident, which was actually Lori's home that Alex met Charles in, they found his body already laid out and completely unconscious. At that point, Alex was the only person home, but shortly thereafter, Lori had returned with her daughter Tylee. Ultimately, the police did take all three parties down to the police station. They conducted separate interviews of all three, and they concluded that Alex's actions were justified as self-defense. Let's fast forward 4 days, because on July 15th of 2019, 4 days following the shooting, Lori had the unmitigated gall to call Charles's life insurance company and request a payout.
May I have the name of the insured? L. Charles Vallow. And who am I speaking with? This is Lori Vallow. And your relationship to the insured?
He's my husband.
Okay, ma'am, I'm just going to need to ask you a few questions so that I can open the claim, and then I can go over the claim procedure with you and answer any questions that you may have afterwards.
That would be great.
Okay, first of all, may I have your daytime phone number, please? And what was the date of Mr. Vallow's passing?
July 11th.
And what was the cause of his passing?
Well, he was shot.
Okay.
So I don't know how I want to put that.
Okay. All right. And I hate to ask, but is it?
Yeah,
you can just say yes or no. Was it a homicide?
No, it was an accident.
An accident. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what state did he pass away in?
Arizona.
Okay. All right, just bear with me for one moment. I just need to pull up a few other things.
Okay.
Are you aware of who the primary beneficiary of the policy is?
It's me.
Okay. And may I have your, I'm sorry, one moment. My computer just went away for a second. Okay. And may I have your current mailing address? Okay, ma'am. That is all the information I need to open the claim. What we will do now is review the policy and the file to confirm the beneficiary information and determine the claim requirements that we will need to settle this particular claim. Once we have completed our review, we will prepare a claim packet to send to the named beneficiary once that has been confirmed. And the claim packet can either be mailed or emailed or faxed. How would you like to receive a correspondence?
Email would be great.
Okay, and what is your email address?
It's Lori, Lori.
Okay. All right, so you should receive an email from our office within the next 3 to 5 business days or sooner. It will have the instructions listed. Once you receive the information, if you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to give our office a call, and then we can go from there. Okay, is there anything I can help you with at this time?
That's it, I think.
Okay, ma'am. Well, I'm very sorry for your loss. You take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
As is typical, the call was recorded, and on the recorded line, Lori told the representative that she was the beneficiary of Charles's life insurance policy, and she just wanted to know when she could get that money. But do you guys remember how I said that Charles ultimately changed the beneficiary of his life insurance policy from Lori to his sister Kay? It just makes me giggle when I think about it, because thank God. So Lori made that discovery shortly thereafter, a few days after calling the life insurance company, and she realized that she was no longer the beneficiary of the life insurance policy, and she didn't take that too well.
Okay, I do have the policy pulled up. Who am I speaking with?
This is Lori Vallow. I'm returning your call.
Yeah.
I missed you.
Okay, no problem. Let me just get all of this information up. Okay, so in your voicemail, you stated that you had something that stated you are the beneficiary of the policy.
Right. So I have the original policy where I was the beneficiary, the sole beneficiary, and then we changed the policy to where I was 80%, and we added 2 people, the Porches, who invested in our company for each 10%. And that's the last one I have. That's the last update that I have. So can you tell me when that was changed again? I mean, I know my husband is the agent on record, so he can change it. He's the owner.
Okay, I don't see anything regarding the second change that you said. I don't, and with those percentages, I don't see anything at all with you as 80% at any time.
Okay, so maybe that's something he just told him he was going to do. That's just a handwritten copy I have that I found. So.
Okay, so well, I really can't give too much information, but I can tell you that the beneficiary was changed in March of this year.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out what he was doing since we have 5 kids and we've been married for 15 years.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I know he owes a lot of people money, and I was worried if I got money, they'd be coming after me for money.
Right, no, I understand that.
But now I will be with none.
In a couple of text message exchanges between Lori and her side dude, Chad Daybell, she was expressing her shock and her disbelief, her rage and her discontent about the fact that Charles actually had the audacity to change the life insurance beneficiary. She said it wasn't Charles. She said it was the demon within Charles. Remember that little guy I told you guys about? Ned Schneider. So I don't think I already mentioned this, but it's extraordinarily important to mention. Lori's brother Alex was also really big into Chad's teachings. They literally idolized this man, and they did everything that he said to do. Lori's brother Alex also got excommunicated from the LDS church multiple times, and according to one of their cousins in a documentary that I watched, it was because he was having sexual relationships outside of marriage. I would say that kind of lends credence to the fact that Alex just kind of wanted to follow Chad even more. You're a Mormon who's been excommunicated a few times. If you are Mormon, if you're super religious, excommunication is a pretty big deal. So in his eyes, following Chad's word would kind of help him get closer to his beliefs. September 2019, that's 2 months after Charles is ultimately killed, Lori decided that she was going to move herself, Tylee, and JJ to Rexburg, Idaho. Now, I don't mean to drop any fecal matter on any viewers or anyone who might be listening who actually are familiar with Rexburg, Idaho, but my first thought when I heard this was, what the heck is there? And I'll answer that for you guys. Chad and his wife Tammy and their 5 kids lived in Rexburg, Idaho, so that's what motivated Lori to go. Let's fast forward just a few more days, because on September 8th of 2019, Lori, Tylee, JJ, and her brother Alex went to Yellowstone National Park together. They took pictures. Everything seemed relatively normal. But that was the last sighting of Tylee alive. Do you know what I find extraordinarily suspicious? That the very next morning, on September 9th of 2019, Alex Cox's cell phone data placed him in Chad Daybell's backyard for approximately 2 hours. What's also really suspicious is on that same day, Chad Daybell texted his wife Tammy and told her that he had shot a raccoon and was going to bury it in the family's pet cemetery. A raccoon? 2 weeks later, literally 14 days after Tylee was last seen alive, and on September 22nd of 2019, that was the last time anyone would see JJ alive as well. That morning, JJ attended school like normal, and JJ was even seen that afternoon by a couple of Lori's friends who were staying the weekend with her, Melanie Gibb, remember that name because we talked about her, and her boyfriend David. Melanie and David told officers that they saw Alex carrying JJ into the apartment, but after that, they didn't see him again. Also very suspicious. The very next morning, kind of like what happened with Tylee and her disappearance, and on September 23rd of 2019, Alex was back in Chad's backyard. What's even worse is that Lori explained to her friends Melanie and David, who had last seen JJ the very night prior, that JJ had to be taken away because he had become a zombie. Also, Lori called JJ's school to inform them that she was taking him out of school indefinitely because she had plans to homeschool him instead. Do you remember how I said in the last video that you should remember the name Melanie Boudreaux? Just a brief recap. Melanie Boudreaux is Lori's niece. Lori's sister Stacy is Melanie's mother. So, Melanie was married to a man named Brandon Boudreaux, and they were going through a pretty contentious divorce, if not they had already completed a pretty contentious divorce. But something really strange happened to Brandon. 9 days after JJ was last seen alive, and on October 2nd of 2019, an assailant did a drive-by shooting in an attempt to kill Brandon in Arizona. What's even worse is that officers noted that the assailant was driving Charles Vallow's car. So remember, Charles was shot and killed on July 11th of 2019. So here we are, 4 full months later, and someone's driving his vehicle and trying to kill Lori's niece's ex-husband? You cannot make this shit up. By the grace of God, or whatever entity you guys believe in. I don't want to impose that upon anyone. But Brandon was completely unscathed, and he called the police and informed them of the shooting. Police ultimately believe that the assailant in Charles's car was none other than Lori's enforcer, her brother Alex Cox. Things in Lori's story just keep getting stranger and stranger. Because 7 days after Brandon was shot at, and on October 9th of 2019, Tammy Daybell, Chad's wife, called the police to inform them that she had just been shot at by a paintball gun in the driveway of her own home. Much like Brandon, during this incident, Tammy was unscathed. But unfortunately for Tammy, this would be short-lived. 10 days after that initial shooting, and on October 19th of 2019, Tammy Daybell died unexpectedly in her sleep. Tammy was 49 years old at the time of her death, but also at the time, officers ruled her death a result of natural causes. Less than 2 weeks following Tammy's death, and on November 5th of 2019, merely 12 days after Tammy's death, Chad and Lori went to Hawaii and got married on a beach. The photos of the celebration are rather odd, and the reason I say they're odd is because of everything we know about this case. All of these people, including your children, you sick witch, have passed. And according to you, it's just all a coincidence. But you want to be celebrating with a man that you've known for a few months. Just odd. Thank God. Their sick, twisted, maniacal, diabolical, just disrespectful celebration would be short-lived. 3 weeks later, and on November 26th of 2019, Charles Vallow's sister, Kay Woodcock, called the police and asked them to do a welfare check on JJ. Kay explained it had been far too long since she had seen him, and she was extraordinarily concerned about his well-being. Thank you, Kay. Because at this point, Lori, Chad, and Alex's lies, deceit, deception, criminal activity, everything, it begins to unravel. Law enforcement then go to Lori's apartment in Rexburg, Idaho, and they attempt to do a welfare check on JJ. When they arrive in the driveway, they notice Chad Daybell and Alex Cox loading some things into a pickup truck. They asked Alex where JJ was, and Alex explained that JJ was with Charles's sister Kay, but police already knew that was a freaking lie because Kay's the one who called them to the property to do the welfare check to begin with. After being caught in that lie, law enforcement asked Alex where Lori was, and he claims to not know. They then turn to Chad and they ask him where Lori is. And this man, despite being her fit husband, explains to them that he doesn't know where she is at all. Law enforcement just decides to knock on the door of her apartment. And who answers? But Lori. Lori then tells law enforcement that JJ is in Arizona with her friend Melanie Gibb. So law enforcement in Idaho then call the law enforcement officials in Arizona, and they attempt to contact Melanie. They're successful in their attempts, and Melanie tells them that JJ was with her, but he's on his way back to Idaho at this point, which was a lie. After law enforcement had caught on to the lie, and I don't remember the exact time frame for this, but within a couple days, Lori, Alex, and Chad were out of that Idaho apartment. After Melanie gets confronted by Arizona police, she gets extraordinarily nervous. She then calls Chad and Lori, and she questions them as to why Lori would tell police that JJ was with her. Another thing that she did was she recorded the entirety of that conversation.
Hello, sweet Melanie.
Hi, Chad. Hey, Lori.
Hey, let me put on speaker.
Oh, okay.
All right.
We're enough with the phone.
How are you guys?
We're okay. How are you doing, babe?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks. I was wondering, where are you guys?
We're just hanging out.
Hanging out? Are you in Idaho?
We're near Idaho.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to ask you a question, if you don't mind, Lori.
Yeah, of course, honey.
I want to know, you remember we talked about JJ going to Kay's house, and you told me they went there, and now he's not there? I was wondering what happened.
I had to move him somewhere else because of her actions. So
Was she doing something? Like, was she trying to come get him or something? Or, like, trying to kidnap him?
well, she said that lots of times before, but
Okay. When I asked Chad the other day, I was like, hey, where is JJ? And he said, for my security, he didn't want me to know. So is there a reason I should be in danger to know where he is?
no, it's nobody. It's his danger. It's the danger that there's people after me.
Okay.
We just felt that if you knew, that puts you in a danger.
Well, just in a bad position.
Yeah, bad position.
Everybody, if they don't know anything, then they don't have to say they know.
Right. So you're just worried. Okay.
I'm just to keep him protected and
keep you protected.
And keep everybody else good.
I appreciate that. Well, I was wondering why you told the police why he was with me.
I just needed to have somebody so I wouldn't have to tell them where he really was because they were going to tell Kay where he is.
Oh, yeah. So do you think it's like your family or, like your family, your dad or, those people?
well, not my whole family, but as you know, most of my family is working against me and with her, basically.
Yeah. Is JJ safe?
He is safe and happy.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Are you afraid of anything? Like, are you afraid to tell me that you're just afraid that that I could be in danger? Like like I don't, like if I knew, like how could that hurt me? I don't understand how that could hurt me if I knew where he was.
Well, I'm just not telling anybody so that nobody has to say where he is or get questioned to where he is, so I can keep him as safe as possible.
Yeah. Okay, I hope that he's okay. I hope you guys are okay. I did have a question that I asked Al at one point, your brother, if I wanted to know, like where he was, and he said I did not want to know, and that he could not be found. So what does that mean?
I don't know why he would say that, but it's the same story. Like I don't even want Al to know. I don't want anybody to know, so that nobody has to be worried about it. I mean, nobody has to be questioned about it, so he can be safe.
Okay, let's take a minute and stop right here, because everyone's in a frenzy about where JJ is. But then what about Tylee? Lori has 2 kids. Tylee was last seen alive in September of 2019. So law enforcement picked up on that fact, and now they start to get curious in their investigation into the disappearance of both kids. So while law enforcement is continuing their investigation, something really, really, really peculiar happens. On December 11th of 2019, Alex Cox dies. According to police, he died of a heart attack, but with all of the death, murder, and destruction in Lori and Chad's paths, you just can't convince me of that. And do you guys remember how I told you to pay attention to the name Zulema Pastenes? Yes. So Zulema was one of the friends who went with Melanie, Gibb, and Lori to the conference where she ultimately met Chad Daybell. Okay, her name actually has resurfaced. How, do you ask? Zulema, Marries, Lori's brother and enforcer, Alex Cox. Much like everyone else, Zulema was a strong supporter of Chad in all of his teachings, and he was somehow able to convince her that marrying Alex was in her best interest. After hearing of Alex's death, the law enforcement officers in this case get more suspicious as to the natural causes that caused Tammy's death. So on December 12th of 2019, they exhumed Tammy's body to figure out what actually caused her death. While they're waiting for the results of the autopsy, on January 25th of 2020, law enforcement officials catch up to Lori and Chad in Hawaii. Hawaiian officials served Lori with an official order of production, asking her to produce her children within 5 calendar days before they would have to take other actions. An order of production is exactly what it sounds like. It's a court telling someone, produce the thing that I'm asking you to produce, otherwise you're in violation of this court's order and we can take other actions. To nobody's surprise, that 5th calendar day comes on January 30th of 2020, and Lori does not produce either Tylee or JJ because she can't. On February 21st of 2020, almost 1 full month after Lori failed to comply with the court's order to produce her children, Hawaiian officials arrest Lori on several charges, including child abandonment, desertion, and violation of court order. They then extradite Lori back to Idaho, and her bond is set at $5 million. We've talked about this a little bit before on this channel, But extradition merely is the process of taking someone's body from one place to another, right? So Lori was in Hawaii. The crimes occurred in Idaho, so they just moved her from Hawaii to Idaho. You'll notice that I say that Lori was charged and arrested. Why the heck didn't they charge Chad? Well, because at that time, they didn't have any physical proof that either JJ or Tylee were killed. They only had proof that they were missing. And so they didn't really have anything to charge Chad with at that time. But thankfully, that would change really soon. On June 9th of 2020, armed with a search warrant, law enforcement officials in Rexburg, Idaho went to Chad's property and they made some disturbing findings. They found the bodies of both Tylee and JJ in Chad's backyard. JJ's body was found in a black plastic bag tied with duct tape that was near a tree, while Tylee's body was found a short distance away in the pet cemetery. Stop right here. Do you remember how, the day following Tylee's disappearance, Chad texted his wife Tamara that he had just shot a raccoon and he was going to bury it in the pet cemetery? Chad is ultimately arrested, and his bond is similarly set at $5 million. It's important to note that at this time, neither Chad or Lori are charged with the death of her kids. Instead, Chad was charged with concealment and destruction of evidence. Let me explain to you why I think that is. The bodies are found, and they're found in his backyard, so why on earth would you not charge him with the murders of both of these kids? I think it's because police wanted to do a thorough investigation. Although the bodies are found, the causes of death aren't yet known because there was no testing, no autopsies, or anything done to the children's bodies. Does that make sense? And I'm completely speculating here, but I think that would make sense. Specifically, remember that I said that both of their bonds were set in the amount of $5 million. I mean, at that point, they're not going anywhere anyway. Police wanted to do thorough follow-up and thorough investigation before they charged them with murders. And if my speculations are correct, I do think that makes a little bit of sense. Almost one full year later, on May 24th of 2021, Lori and Chad are finally charged with the murders of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. Specifically, Lori is charged with the first-degree murders of each of her children, as well as the conspiracy to commit the murder of her fifth husband's only wife, Tammy. Chad is charged similarly. He's charged with the first-degree murders of both Tylee and JJ, but as it relates to his only wife, Tammy, he was charged with her first-degree murder. It's important to note that at this time, the prosecution vowed to seek the death penalty for both Chad and Lori. 3 days after these charges, and on May 27th of 2021, Lori was deemed not fit to stand trial, and she was confined in a psychiatric facility for treatment. The very next month, in June of 2021, Lori is charged with conspiracy to commit the first-degree murder of her husband, Charles Vallow, in Arizona. So how does this work? She's charged with all these separate charges in Idaho, but she's also charged in Arizona. But she's also in a mental facility. Let me explain all of this to you. Because Lori is currently in a mental health facility, and because she's currently deemed unfit to stand trial, everything pauses, everything comes to a halt, and everything just completely stops. When the court ultimately finds that she's fit and competent to stand trial, it will then advise her of the charges against her in Idaho, because she's in Idaho at that point. And then she'll be extradited back from Idaho to Arizona and face the charges there. So why would the charges in Idaho proceed before the charges in Arizona? 2 reasons. 1, she was extradited back from Hawaii to Idaho, right? So she's already in Idaho. And 2, The charges in Idaho were filed first. She was first charged in Idaho, and then a month later, she was charged in Arizona. So Idaho just takes the first bite at the apple, essentially. On October 11th of 2022, Lori is deemed fit to stand trial. Subsequent to that, on October 19th of 2022, as I mentioned to you guys, because she is now competent, the court would advise her of the charges against her. And she's so advised. Lori's first trial was for all of the crimes she committed in Idaho. So all charges against her as it pertains to Tylee, all charges against her as it pertains to JJ, and all charges against her as it pertains to Tammy. All of them were combined, and she was tried with one trial for all charges.
Money, power, and sex. That's what this case is about. The defendant, Lori Vallow Daybell, used money, power, and sex, or the promise of those things, to get what she wanted. What she wanted was money, power, and sex. It didn't matter what obstacles she had to remove to get what she wanted. It didn't matter if the obstacle was a thing or a person. And if it was a person, it didn't matter who. Tylee Ryan was a vibrant young woman, 17 years old, a whole life ahead of her. She was just about to enter into adulthood and make her own way in the world. Who knows what she would have become? Tylee had already lost her father, and she received Social Security benefits because of that. Tylee had money. Lori wanted it. Tylee's gone. Joshua Jackson Vallow, lovingly known by friends and family as JJ, was a 7-year-old, vibrant, happy-go-lucky little boy. He had most of his childhood and his whole life ahead of him. But JJ was tough. He's a 7-year-old. He took a lot of time and effort and energy to care for. That time, effort, and energy took away from the defendant doing what she wanted to do, and from the defendant being with Chad Daybell and devoting her time and attention to him. JJ had also lost his father. And when JJ lost his father, he became even that much more difficult to care for. No longer a second parent to help. Not only that, JJ also was entitled to Social Security benefits. The defendant didn't want to have to take care of JJ anymore. She wanted the money. JJ's gone. Tamra Douglas Daybell, known by friends and family as Tammy, a 49-year-old mother of 5, a grandmother, a computer whiz by all accounts. She was married to Chad Daybell. The defendant wanted Chad all to herself. Chad was the beneficiary of a life insurance policy for Tammy. Lori wanted those things. Tammy's gone.
Like the state of Idaho, I also thank you for your service. This is a difficult case, a case we have not been able to settle without you. That's why you've been called here to help us settle this case. If the court will allow a brief introduction, I know a lot about you with your 12-page or 20-page questionnaires. So I'd like to just make a brief introduction of the defense. I've been an attorney since 1991. I've been both a private attorney and a public defender. And in small county Idaho, there's a lot of us lawyers who do both public defense work and private work. And so over the past 32 years, I've done a bit of both. I've been assigned to 27 murder cases over the course of my career, and they're difficult. They're difficult cases. I was assigned to this case. I'm paid by the taxpayers, and so thank you for paying your taxes. I've had a general practice where I do a little bit of everything, and then I get about one of these difficult cases a year assigned to me, and we do what we can. What does a defense lawyer do? We make sure that our clients' constitutional rights are protected. We make sure that the government does its job. We make sure that proof beyond a reasonable doubt is in place before there's a decision. So with these difficult cases, we resolve 99% of our cases. Less than 1% of cases actually make it to trial. And so I believe the state and the defense, we generally do a good job of resolving our disputes. And sometimes when we can't, then we call on you to resolve it for us. I'm being assisted in this case by John Thomas. He's been an attorney since 1999. He has also both experience in private law firms and public defenders' offices, where he's handled many serious cases. He's received many accolades for his lawyering, and I appreciate him helping me. I also am being assisted by Brandon Hobbs. You've probably seen him, and he's an investigator, and so he's helped us investigate this case. Being a defense lawyer isn't always a popular job, and so I appreciate you being respectful towards me, and I'll do the same. I'll be respectful towards you.
And Alex Cox was there as well.
Okay. Now, who is Alex Cox?
He was Lori's brother, and then he later became my husband.
Now, you had said Chad had offered to give you a blessing. Did Chad give you a blessing at Lori Vallow's house?
Yes, after they came back inside, Lori took me to, excuse me, to a separate part of the house, room, separate from where everybody else was at. And Chad said he was going to give me a blessing, and he gave me a blessing that night.
Okay. Do you remember what the blessing entailed?
Yes, he said that I was a very special person, that I was a very special being, and that I that I was going to do some amazing things in the future, and that he was, I guess, grateful to know me, and it was full of a lot of praise.
Okay. And Lori was present?
Yes.
Okay. Was anyone else present?
No.
Okay. Now, this meeting at Lori's home, was this after the St. George conference?
Yes.
Was it in the fall, or was it before Christmas?
It was before Christmas. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you have contact with Lori or Chad again that fall or before Christmas?
I may have, but I don't remember it too clearly.
Did you attend, was there a meeting of Chad and Lori and you at Melanie Gibb's home?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Chad had come down to do a podcast with Lori and Melanie Gibb. They had started a podcast, and he came to be one of the guests at their podcast.
And while you were there, did you talk to Chad and Lori?
Yes, Chad invited me to, he wanted us to go to lunch. He said he had some information to give me, and he really wanted me to meet them for lunch.
And did you do that?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you go to lunch?
We went to a restaurant called Firebirds in Gilbert, Arizona.
Okay. What happened at the restaurant at Gilbert? At Firebirds?
Chad said that he had some information to give me about my prior lives and privations, and he really wanted to speak with me in regards to that.
Okay. Who was present at this lunch?
Melanie, Gibb, Lori Vallow, and Chad Daybell.
Okay. So what did he tell you about at the lunch at Firebirds?
He was trying to tell me what the information, he was trying to give me the information, but for some reason, Chad and Lori didn't want Melanie to hear what he was going to tell me. So he just told me what kind of information he was going to give me. And then he called me to tell me what my prior lives had been. And in this conversation, he told me that there was a way that he rated people, whether they were light or dark, and so he gave me a rating of the light, how light I was, and then he told me that I had that I had other lives on this earth, and he gave me the times and who I was on the prior lives that I had lived on this earth.
Now, during that conversation of the light and dark, did he give light and dark to anyone else? Or was this conversation solely about you?
During this conversation, it was only about me.
After 5 weeks and numerous witnesses, the jurors find Lori guilty on all charges.
In the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the State of Idaho, in and for the County of Fremont, State of Idaho Plaintiff versus Lori Vallow, aka Lori Daybell, Defendant, case number CR 22211624. Verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1. In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 2. In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan? Answer, guilty. Question number 3. In regards to count 3 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 4. In regards to count 4, the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Answer, guilty. Question number 5. In regards to count 5 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell? Answer, guilty. Question number 6. In regards to count 7 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of grand theft? Answer, guilty. Dated this 12th day of May, 2023, signed by the presiding officer.
Because I'm a woman of my word, we're going to compare and contrast something. If you guys will remember, in my 3-part series of Monica, Sen, and Tylee, I went on and on and on about how I felt the prosecution went on and on and on, and they just wouldn't stop. Do I think it's the same thing here? And my answer is absolutely not. But let me explain. Monica, Sen, and Tylee's trial was 10 weeks. 10 weeks. There was 1 victim, 3 defendants, and pretty straight and clear facts. Lori's first trial had 3 victims, multiple charges, a bunch of different witnesses, and even me explaining this story to you is convoluted and complicated. It's important for the jurors to understand what's going on, and even so, the prosecutors in Idaho managed to get convictions on everything in half the time, 5 weeks. So no, I don't think that the 5 weeks here was too long. I think it was more than appropriate. And yes, I'm still going to die on the hill that Monica, Sen, and Tylee's trial was far, far too. Lori's sentencing occurred on July 31st of 2023. But before sentencing, let me tell you about something else that happened that was rather interesting. Do you guys remember how I said initially that the prosecutors vowed to seek the death penalty as to both Chad and Lori? Well, the court removed that option as it pertains to Lori. But let me explain why. Despite what you see on TV, a court cannot just dismiss charges, penalties, or whatever the prosecution files all willy-nilly. The court has to have a legal justification to do so. In this case, the court ruled that the prosecutors had violated the disclosure deadlines and the discovery rules, and as a sanction for doing that, it dismissed the possibility to seek the death penalty against Lori.
I would like to start by quoting John from the New Testament in the Bible. In John chapter 8, verse 7, Jesus says, "He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." Then in verse 15, Jesus says, "Ye judge after the flesh, I judge no man. And yet if I judge, my judgment is true." Jesus knows me, and Jesus understands me. I mourn with all of you who mourn, my children and Tammy. Jesus Christ knows the truth of what happened here. Jesus Christ knows that no one was murdered in this case. Accidental deaths happen. Suicides happen. Fatal side effects from medications happen. I have a different perspective in life because in 2002, when I was pregnant with Tylee, I died in the hospital while in labor with her. They tried to stop my labor. They put me on the table and they put something in my IV, and I felt my spirit falling to the floor. I was standing near my pregnant body, watching the doctors try to revive me, which took them a few minutes. In that time, my sister Stacy was standing to my left. I turned to hug her and was surprised that her spirit was as tangible as a physical body, because I knew I was in spirit and she was in spirit. She said she needed to show me some things, and we went to heaven. I later returned to my body. Because of this experience, I have access to heaven and the spirit world. Since then, I have had many communications from people now living in heaven, including my children, Tylee Ashlyn and Joshua Jackson, my sisters, Stacy and Lolly, my aunts and my uncles, and my grandparents. I have had many communications with Jesus Christ, the Savior of this world, and our heavenly parents. I have had many angelic visitors have come and communicated with me and even manifested themselves to me. Because of these communications, I know for a fact that my children are happy and busy in the spirit world. Because of my communications with my friend Tammy Daybell, I know that she is also very happy and extremely busy. I have always mourned the loss of my loved ones, and I have lost many in this mortal world. However, I know them more than most people. I know where they are now and what they're doing. I know how wonderful heaven is, and I'm homesick for it every single day. I know we all lived in heaven before we were born on earth, and we were all adult spirits in the heavenly realm. We chose to come to earth as mortals. Heaven is more wonderful than you can possibly imagine. I do not fear death, but I look forward to it. I did not want to return to my body when I was out of it.
And it is the most shocking thing, really, I can imagine, is that a mother killed her own children and you simply have no remorse for it. Even sitting here today, there's no remorse for what you did. After all of this evidence through trial, you haven't shown any remorse. You haven't said you're sorry. You haven't done anything to seek leniency from this court. There's been a lot of people during trial and here who explain the devastation you're responsible for, and you've forever altered the lives, not in a good way, for many, many people, destroying family relationships, taking people away that were loved, cared for, and needed. You may not believe to this day that you've done anything wrong, and you still may think you're justified by your religious beliefs for what happened here. I'm not here to judge that, but I don't believe that any God in any religion would want to have this happen, what happened here. And your crimes are heinous and egregious, and that alone can constitute a major aggravating factor that requires me to impose a serious length of incarceration. So after weighing all those factors, I need to in aggravation. I find that the sentences I'm about to impose will serve the interest of justice by, number one, preventing you from ever doing this again, that they will not depreciate the seriousness of your crimes, will punish you appropriately, and will serve to deter both you and others. So that concludes the aggravating factors the court considered. At this time then, I am prepared to pronounce sentence. Mr. Thomas, Mr. Archibald, and the defendant, would you please rise for the pronouncement of sentence? Based on all the relevant circumstances, including the evidence and recommendations presented in court today, it's the judgment of this court. Ms. Vallow, you'll be sentenced as follows. I'll first note I'm going to take up the counts out of order as I want to address the substantive murder sentences first. So on count 2, the charge you were convicted of, the first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan, you are sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence of fixed determinate term of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. On count 4, the charge of the first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow, you are sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence, a fixed determinate life imprisonment sentence with no possibility of parole. I'll next address the 3 conspiracy counts you've been convicted of, and note under Idaho Code 18-1701, the punishment for those crimes is the same as the underlying offenses you combined to commit. One of the offenses you combined to commit was first-degree murder, so those may be punishable also by imprisonment for life. When I look at what the appropriate sentences should be for the conspiracy charges, at first I wondered if they should be as long of a term or serious as the substantive murder charges. However, What I've concluded is that these conspiracy convictions merit the same grave punishment for several reasons. First, the conspiracies in which you engaged in have had far-reaching impacts on many people besides the deceased victims. And with what the court's heard, I am convinced that the conspiracy charges also merit the same serious sentence. So on count one, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception, you're sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence, a fixed determinate term of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. On count three, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception, you're sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence, a fixed determinate term of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. And on count five, the conspiracy to commit the first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell, you're sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence, a fixed determinate term of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. Finally, the court will address count seven, which is the charge of grand theft. On that charge, court is going to sentence you to a fixed determinate term of 5 years of prison, followed by an indeterminate term of 5 years of prison for a total 10-year term of imprisonment on the grand theft. Court will next consider whether sentences should be imposed consecutively or concurrently. I generally don't, I'm a pragmatic person, and I've struggled with the point of a consecutive sentence when in Idaho, a life sentence is just that, a life sentence without parole. And I've thought it through. However, when I looked at this case and the more I thought about it, I've determined that because there are three separate murders with three separate victims that occurred at three separate times, then running counts concurrently would not serve the interests of justice, because those crimes all need to be taken into account separately and distinctly and individually. And you need to be held accountable separately for each of the three murders. So on those counts, the court will run consecutively the count 2 murder of Tylee Ryan, consecutive to count 4, the murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow, and count 5 will run consecutive to count 2 and 4, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell. So 3 consecutive life terms of prison.
On December 29th of 2023, 5 months after Lori was sentenced to the 3 consecutive life sentences in Idaho, she was extradited back to Arizona. You might be thinking to yourself, but what happened to Chad? In April of 2024, after a 7-week trial, Chad was convicted of all charges against him. Unlike Lori, Chad was facing the death penalty, and that's ultimately what he was sentenced to.
As to count 1, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the murder of Tylee Ryan, upon the jury's finding of guilty and return of the special verdict form, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust, the court therefore, on count 1, the defendant is sentenced to death. On count 2, the first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust, the court therefore, on count 2, sentences the defendant to death. On count 3, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the murder of J.J. Vallow, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances, when weighed against the mitigating circumstances, do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore on count 3 sentences the defendant to death. On count 4, first-degree murder of J.J. Vallow, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances, when weighed against the mitigating circumstances, do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count 4, sentences the defendant to death. On count 5, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell, the jury, having found beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances, when weighed against the mitigating circumstances, do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count 5, sentences the defendant to death. On count 6, the first-degree murder charge, the murder of Tammy Daybell, the jury, having found beyond a reasonable doubt and returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances, when weighed against the mitigating circumstances, do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count 6, sentences the defendant to death.
Okay, you guys, we're going to cut the video right here. In our third part of the Lori Vallow Daybell saga, we're going to continue on with what happened in her Arizona trials. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, y'all take care.